Okay, good afternoon, one and all. Good evening if you're from East Eastern Europe, and good day if you're from North America, South America, Central America. Hello, everyone. Right, obviously it's live sports question answer session on all sports, but I'm going to start with the news that's going on at the moment. Man United, will they offer Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the permanent role, and if so, when? It's been rumoured that he'll be on half the pay of what Mourinho was on, so that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. We've obviously got the issues going on with domestic rugby union in Wales, and the club game especially, and funding, and the proposed merger between the Ospreys and the Scarlets collapsing, and the issues going on with the proposed merger of one of the Welsh or two of the Welsh regions, and the proposal to have a brand new Welsh region in the north of Wales, which they want to actually fast track through for next season. That's creating a lot of problems and a lot of uncertainty for the players. We've obviously got the Six Nations this weekend. We've obviously also had Arsenal's defeat in Rennes. We've had Real Madrid's embarrassment by Ajax. Gareth Bale come under a lot of criticism from Real Madrid fans. His agent is not helping the situation, let's be honest. And a whole host of other things. But the rugby talk is the big one, because governance of the game, with World Rugby's proposal for a 12-team international league, does it devalue the Six Nations? Does it devalue the Rugby Championship? Does it devalue the World Cup, especially the World Cup? And in a World Cup year as well, which has already been filled with controversy about teams threatening to boycott, concerns over Japan restarting whaling, so there's political pressures there, and a whole host of other things. And it's been universally panned by a lot of fans, criticised, and basically pulled apart. There's a whole host of other issues to look at as well, but we can always ask the questions and I can give you the answers. Hello, Taylor. Hello. Thank you for obviously popping in. The interesting thing is, though, when it comes to a whole variety of things, is it's to do with money. Ultimately, it's to do with money. And the rugby issues are the ones dominating at the moment. We've seen in rugby league, Widnes obviously enter administration and come out of it, but it was easily avoidable. They could have easily avoided administration. With the deal that they have, they could have had that deal the day they entered administration, and that was easily avoidable. 12-point deduction. We've also seen the GB Lions rugby league team being reformed for a tour later this year, but we're not playing Australia. There's tests against Tonga and Papua New Guinea, which are fully deserved. I think with the way those two teams played in the World Cup a couple of years ago, they fully deserve to get a tour from a Great Britain team. And there's obviously a match against New Zealand. Now, New Zealand had a 3-test series against England in November. They lost that series 2-1. But no Australian series. So that's an interesting one as well. And it's nice to see the Great Britain Lions rugby league team reconstituted. It's been 12 years without, and it's been 13 years without a tour down under. But not playing Australia, I think, is if the RFL especially and Super League wants to recoup some money because they're making losses, they should have played against Australia. They really should have played against Australia. Nothing against the other three nations that are guaranteed tests at the end of the year, but they should have played Australia. And that also comes into, the fact they've got this test series. What TV companies are going to be hosting the rights? Are they going to be free to air as it is a national side playing, like the England side were broadcasting the World Cup, or is it going to be on Sky? And if it's on Sky, that's another hurdle put in the way of growing the sport. Ice hockey, we're waiting for an announcement from the English Ice Hockey Association about the future of the NIHL. What do I think on Ryan Watt's ban? I know a little bit more about it than you possibly do. I've got friends who are members of the supporters club at Bracknell. I am one of the guys up in drum corner making a lot of noise on the big kettle drum. I was talking to my mate Ash, who's part of the supporters club, and a few others about Ryan Watt's ban. And the altercation between the fan is a complex one. The issues on the ice were the issues on the ice, and there are other players suspended. Both Bear brothers are suspended, for example. So that post-whistle, end of the game, bench clearance, suspensions have been handed out. What then happened when the players left the ice is open to conjecture, and this is where I think the involvement with the fan suspension that he's received has come from. The players wanted to get to the dressing room. One of the fans decided to instigate verbal confrontation with Watt and others, and it's whether verbal or physical altercation has taken place. Watt's banned. To be fair, he wasn't going to play much the rest of the season anyway. He's got a back injury, so it's not really hurting the team in that sense. But because he's banned, we cannot call a player from the Hornets. What else do I make of it? It strikes me that we have precedent. We saw Mickelson, I believe, or whatever his name was, last year for the MK Lightning, get a similar length suspension for actually hitting a fan at a Guildford Flames Milton Keynes Lightning game last season. That made massive news actually across the pond in North America. Canadian and North and US broadcasters picked up that suspension and ran with it. And this was in the aftermath of the Galactus Fretter incident at the Belford Sheffield Giants Sheffield Steelers game that season as well. So it made the British Elite League and the British National League look very bush league and very, very amateur when it came to player discipline. And it was badly reported, but it made news across the Atlantic, and it had set a precedent for the length of ban. So Ryan Watt, even if he was verbally giving the verbals, he's treading a fine line. But he had a back injury. He wasn't even going to be playing that game because of his back injury. He was only dressed to serve team penalties. So that comes down on the coach, Doug Shepherd, for fouling up, basically, and because the guy wasn't even fully fit. It's not going to hurt the team, really, because he hasn't really been that effective this season. Not going to lie. He hasn't really done much on the ice apart from take penalties. So in that respect, it doesn't affect the team and how they play. But there is precedent. Other players as well have had similar length suspensions in regards to altercations with fans. So I'm not surprised by it, but I think it's interesting though. But I'm not surprised by it. I'm not really a big fan of either Watt brother, to be honest. What do I think of tomorrow and Sunday? I'm not going to be able to go to the games this week. I don't think. I've got other issues to sort out next week, and I'm obviously trying to do the match reviews of the Six Nations. But I think, yeah, Swindon can win the regular season, which they fully deserve because they have been the most consistent team. I think some of the teams have really. I mean, Basingstoke have overperformed. I will admit that they have performed better than expectation, and Peterborough and Bracknell have underperformed below expectation. That's the best way I can describe the top four. Is Basingstoke have really performed above expectation, and but as a whole, I'm talking as the whole season. I'm not talking recently. I'm talking as over on the whole season. They were the weakest of the former EPIHL sides. The rink issue, the team that they could put together, the team that they lost, the players they lost to other teams because of uncertainty over the team's future. I would say this: they have overperformed for the whole season. If you look at all the results and where they actually are, where people thought they would be, I think, they have overachieved. Bracknell and Peterborough have underachieved, and they've really both sides have completely lost focus and lost form. And Swindon have been the most consistent, so they fully deserve where they are league position wise. The issues though that we currently have with the league structure, and on which I'm waiting to read the announcement from the EIHA, is what's going to happen next season. We've obviously seen Invicta only could ice, I think, 7 skaters and 1 goalie last weekend. They lost the game 15-0, but in the actual reality, Peterborough got given the game 5-0. It makes a mockery of the Peterborough players who actually went down to play, and it actually makes a mockery of Invicta because they weren't given special dispensation to sign emergency players, which raises questions about the finances of not just ice hockey, but of sport in general, and whether the new TV deal that the Elite League have with Premier Sports, Free Sports, enough money's filtering down to the lower levels, because there's clearly structural and financial issues with the running of the game and the state of the game as it currently sits. So that's an interesting one. Prediction for Premier League 7th place. I'm going Wolves and Watford, 6th and 7th, I think. Those teams, Wolves and Watford. I think West Ham, their slow start of the season has hurt them. A very slow start. I feel sorry for Manuel Pellegrini because of the issues that West Ham have had with with the stadium and with the owners and the controversy around West Ham in general since they moved from Upton Park, I think West Ham could get seventh, but there's several teams in there. I think Watford and Wolves are more likely, and you shouldn't count out Bournemouth either, because they can go on a run. There's a whole host of teams in that mid-table pack that are very evenly matched, and I think you got to look also at teams' form and how they play. Wolves, yeah, Chelsea, Watford, Man City, and we have Cardiff. I think Wolves, are the strongest of the three. Watford close behind. I think West Ham, their slow start to the season is what's causing the issues for that chase to be on the fringe of Europe. I think the slow start they had really hampered where they could be. West Ham could be top six, and I'm not joking with that. I think Wolves have a good recent record. Watford have a good recent record. That's why they're both doing really well in the FA Cup, and that's why Chelsea aren't. Chelsea, I think, could in theory be caught by these teams chasing. I think, especially Wolves and Watford, if they can go on a run, I think they can catch Chelsea. I think Chelsea have got a lot of issues behind the scenes within that club. We saw how it fell apart with Mourinho a couple of years ago, and then Conte, and the toxic atmosphere that emanates from Chelsea. But as it comes to discussing football, yes, the majority of the most common video thread on this channel, if you look at my playlist, it's football. It is. The first big video to hit 100 views was a football video. The first major topic I discussed was the Newcastle tax fraud investigation. Then we looked at some things to do with West Ham as well. We've also Neymar's transfer, for example, a couple of years ago. These were the things that made this channel a sports channel, was football stories. The thing is, football is not my favourite sport. I have fallen out of love to a certain extent with football, and there's a whole variety of reasons for that. Partly the price of it and the cost, and the salaries as well. And I look at the salaries, and I look at the direction that the sport is taking, not just here in the UK, but globally and regionally in Europe. And it seems that, while I understand football is a business and sport is a business, and you have to try and be as profitable as possible, you also have to bear in mind that your customer base is your fans, and if your fans are not happy with a variety of things, and if you lose trust with them, your core customers, the brand means nothing. What I think about the Man United result, well, it's the first coming back from a 2-0 or a 2-goal deficit in a knockout game in a Champions League tie. It's never been done before. I think Solskjaer, the tactics themselves with how the team's set up haven't really changed from Mourinho. It's just that the team are playing with a smile on their face. And I think Solskjaer is one of those managers that I don't think will throw teacups and throw his players under the bus. I think he's teaching these players that even if you lose, you're going to lose. Losing isn't necessarily a bad thing. You can learn more from a loss than a victory. I think he's just allowing the players to express themselves in victory or defeat or draw. I think he's just putting a positive aura around the team. That has had its effect. Yes, they lost the first leg, but this PSG side is a team of individuals. This Man United side has some individuals in there, but is more of a team, especially with the manager saying, look, we are a team here. This is a group effort. This is not an individualistic effort. And he's trying to imbue that sense of togetherness and positivity and respect. Whereas before there was a lack of respect, there was a lack of positivity, and the tactics, although the setup of the team has not changed much, it's the outlook that the team has. They counter-attack with pace, which with Mourinho, it was just slow, methodical, and I'd rather watch varnish dry. So I think that's the difference, is Solskjaer has put in this kind of mentality of positivity, regardless of the situation. Always find a positive. I think the fact that they're in the hunt for an FA Cup, a Champions League, that says something about Solskjaer, is that he's kept them in 2 trophy hunts that if they were still under Mourinho, they wouldn't be in. I'm definitely putting that out there. He's turned around their league fortunes as well. So he's definitely had a positive impact. He does deserve the job. It's a question of when they publicly announce that he is the Man United manager. I think any delay in announcing him actually then creates more uncertainty. And I think these players, the fans, the club, the shareholders of the club, and Solskjaer himself, because Mulder are not, he was meant to be loaned to them on an interim basis. He's done that well. He's had success at Mulder. He brought them success that they've been starved of for years in Norwegian football. People go, oh, it's only Mulder, but if you can win your league that you are in at any level and bring silverware to a team, that is success, and you can use that as a basis for further success. I think the main goal for Man United is to go as far as they can in the FA Cup and the Champions League this season and build for next year. I think what they have to give Solskjaer is some money to spend in the summer. I think there does need to be a definite change in the makeup of the squad. Much like Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, I think both these new managers are going to have to build for next season. They're going to have to do the best they can this season to improve the league position, because where you finish in the league is also prize money. And then they have to, I wouldn't say overhaul squads, but inject some more youth and some new faces and freshen it up a little bit and try and keep with the mantra that they have. But the Man United result, you have to look at it as like it's never been done before. So Solskjaer is breaking records at Man United, both for the club itself and in the competitions that the team play in. He's breaking records that have stood for years, some of which have never been done before. I think people judge him on his English coaching career at Cardiff, and I think that club, Cardiff, is a yo-yo team. They're very unstable, and it was a bad fit with the manager and a club that just didn't work. It didn't work. At United, he has played with the team. He knows the structures of the club behind the scenes. He won a lot of the faces in the administration side of the club. There was, I think, some of the coaching staff he played with. Some of the coaching staff coached him. And he's gone into an environment which he knows well. Cardiff, he didn't know it. Mulder, I think that is his hometown club, actually, in Norway. So the clubs where he's had success, he knew from playing days. Cardiff, he was just thrown in there and it didn't work. And people go, oh, he's an overrated manager because he's won a couple of trophies in Norway. He's a duffer. Actually, he's one of the most successful ex-Ferguson players to go into management. He's far more successful than most of his contemporaries because he actually has silverware, and he I think Solskjaer could become possibly the spiritual successors to Ferguson in the sense of the trophies that he could bring, not just to Man United, but to himself and to any other team that he coaches down the line. I honestly believe Solskjaer could be the equal to Alex Ferguson. But Man United need to give him time. And if he doesn't get the job and he goes back to Mulder, then that's Man United's loss and Norwegian football's gain. And that's, I think, my view on Solskjaer and his position at the moment, and the way the team are playing. They're not overly, as I said, the setup, the way the formation is pretty similar. It's how the team are playing, which is with positivity. And I think that's what he's injected in there is don't fear to make mistakes. Every player is going to make an error. There's going to be misplaced passes. There's going to be shots off target. There's going to be, you're not going to win every game. I think he's imbued upon this team a philosophy of you can learn from defeat. Don't see defeat as a bad thing. Obviously, they want to win every game, but I think he's definitely got the right mindset, and I think going forward, Man United are going to be a tougher team to play against next year. It will be stupid if he doesn't get the job. I think the fact he's still interim manager, I think they just need to just get him signed. They need to get that contract out the way. They need to just pretty much just get him in there, give him a contract, give him time, let him do his thing. Even if he only wins, let's say, the FA Cup, he's still bringing silverware back, to Old Trafford. I think Mulder are resigned to the fact that he is not going to be their manager. come next season. And it's a shame for them because he's done very, very good things with Mulder and he's made them a competitive team again in Norwegian football. For years, they didn't have any success. He brought them success. He is a legend at that club as well. And people are going, oh, but it's only the Norwegian Premier Division. It's not really a major league. It's important for Solskjaer. He felt very honoured to coach at Mulder. Very honoured. And it's one of their historical clubs. I find this. Yes, I can criticise the quality of certain leagues, saying they are lower quality, but at the same time, you have to praise the players that play in those leagues and the fans of those clubs. I mean, some of those clubs have great history and a great fan base, and we shouldn't denigrate the fact that some of these clubs have produced some great players out of Scandinavia. If it wasn't for Scandinavian football, we wouldn't have had Henrik Larsson, Carew, Tori Andre Flo, Solskjaer himself. So I think we have to be very, very careful about how we depict certain leagues as they're not as good quality. Of course, they're not as good as quality, but they're not any less competitive or any less fiercely thoughtful. I think there is a compensation fee of around £8 million, or about I think it's 15 million krona or something like that. There is some sort of contract release clause in there, and this is again where we need a bit more transparency about contracts and release clauses and a whole variety of things. Because let me figure this out. Yeah, I've dropped my pen. Yeah, I think the big question that keeps coming up is I've got to remember how to spell. I've probably misspelled transparency, but yeah, transparency, and that also links into agent fees, because what has come out with Man City of the Jadon Sancho and transparency. Apparently, there was a payment when he was 14, which is illegal. It's against rules, and there's no transparency with agents' fees and the finances. And Man City are currently being looked at for the second time over their sponsorship deal with Etihad and financial fair play rules and how they got around it. And that says to me there is more to this than just allegations. That I think Man City are definitely in very hot water. And what could happen? They could ban them from Europe, but there could be further sanctions, heavy fines, point deductions. They could be thrown out of the league. It depends how serious the allegations are and what is found. But Man City are definitely in a bit of hot water as well. And I don't think that anyone can deny the fact that I think 12 of the Premier League clubs have raised concerns about Man City and financial fair play as well. Says a lot about the feeling within not just the Premier League, but the lack of transparency and agents' fees and sponsorship agreements and where the money comes from. I think that needs to be a lot more transparent if trust between fans, the governing body, and clubs is to be restored, because we're seeing so many issues where there is a lack of transparency and there is mismanagement. And where is this money coming from? And can football as a sport sustain this current boom that's been going on for nearly 30 years? I don't understand how it can, considering we've had at least 4 recessions since the Premier League was formed in this country, or economic downturns that are akin to a recession. And that's a complicated issue on economics side of things. So, especially in the last 10 years, where real wages, so like you or me, our take-home pay has been below the rate of inflation, or we haven't had pay rises in step with inflation. And again, that's an economic political thing that I should redo on the other channel, but it relates to sport. How can, especially football, but other sports as well, have massive amounts of money in it when public services don't, when the average worker doesn't, when the average salary has barely grown for 10 years, yet the football players' salaries have gone through the roof? I mean, there are a lot of questions got to be raised about not just football, but a lot of professional sports. But football is the prime one because of salaries like Aaron Ramsey's contract for next year, £400,000 a week. That's mad. That is completely insane. Where is that money coming from? Oh wait, it's it's raising a lot of questions and leaving more questions unanswered, and there's not enough answers for these questions that are being raised. So yeah, I think football does have an issue with where the money's coming from and transparency, and we can look at a variety of issues. We've got PSG right now, Man City. There are some other ones as well. PSG and Man City are being looked at under that. That's interesting. The score predictions. I don't have a clue. Would not. I would not know. I'm going to have to double check who everyone's playing, really. But I wouldn't know. I don't try and predict scores. I've tried to predict scores for. I think before round 3 of the Six Nations, I only got one score prediction correct, and I got the others all wrong. So I don't try and predict scores. Looking at how sport, especially the last couple of years, is so unpredictable. I could not. The only way you can predict a score is if you're in on a match fix. That's my view on things now. Anyone who comes up with and does these score predictions, form predictions, and things like that, for me, I think to myself, you're involved with match fixing. If you can claim to have a success rate of over 70% of a score prediction, there's fiddling going on there. But if I'm honest, I've got a fixture list somewhere. I have the fixture list. This is going to annoy me. I have actually the fixture list on a piece of paper. Oh God, bear with me a second. Where the fuck has that gone? Ow! Stupid fucking thing. I will find the fixture list. I will find it. Fuck it. Fucking fixture list. Where is it gone? Ow. Well, okay, I've lost the fixture list, so I definitely can't predict anything now. I'm just going to get up who's playing who. Double header. Come on. Let's have a look at the fixture list quickly. Let's see what I can find on the internet before my phone dies. YouTube upload. We play Fulham. Whoever playing Fulham tomorrow is going to win. Fulham. Fulham are hopeless. Fulham have got a defence like a sieve, and they've had a defence like a sieve for the whole season. I'm not even going to hide my disdain of the running of Fulham. We know there's allegations of corruption there and everything. It's. Let's have a look. Home and away. I'm trying to see match predictions or something else. I think Leicester will win that game. I think it's going to be interesting with Claudio Ranieri going back to the team where he obviously won the title with another team. Fulham's defence is just an absolute sieve. I'm not even going to try and hide the fact that their defence is just hopeless, and it has been hopeless all season. I think Huddersfield, is possibly worse, but Huddersfield are on course to equal Derby County's record for lowest points, but Fulham, I think, are on record to have the most goals against in a league season in the Premier League. I don't know what the score is going to be, but I'm definitely going to say that Leicester are going to do them. I think Brendan Rodgers is obviously looking at the fact that they weren't playing with the ball quick enough. They were too lethargic, and if they can just attack with pace, Fulham can't cope. Fulham just do not have the defensive organisation or the willpower. I think they've really just given up. I think they're resigned to the fact that they're not good enough. But you got to look at Sahih Khan, the owner. he's going to have it on his record that he's got Fulham relegated from the Premier League twice in 2 attempts back in. So all the effort he tried to spend in getting Wembley, he didn't actually really spend it on getting the squad ready, really. There's been a lot of panic. I'm not even going to try and predict, but I would say it's Leicester have a good chance of getting at least 3 goals, looking at the average that Fulham concede. Whether, even if it's a 1-0 win for Leicester, a win's a win. But I think Fulham, they're doomed. They're just as doomed as Huddersfield. They just have a few more points. That's my simple way of looking at what's gone on at Leicester. And Ranieri's been sacked, hasn't he? I forgot Ranieri got sacked by Fulham. I completely forgot Scotty Parker's in charge. I've had a brain fart. I'm tired. The fact that Fulham are on their 3rd manager of the season, Scotty Parker, says where Fulham are at. The fact that both sides have sacked their managers that started the season says something about where both clubs are at. I think Leicester, they've lost their way since they won the Premier League. I think they have lost their way. I think they need to freshen up that squad in the summer. I think that does need to be done. I think the squad needs to be freshened up. I think they need to look at the composition of the team. And they definitely need to shore up the midfield and possibly make a couple of defensive signings and just also give some of the youth a chance, like Damari Gray. I think Damari Gray needs to be given more of a chance in the team on a more regular basis. From what I've seen of him over the last couple of years, he's exceptionally talented. I just think he needs regular. Give him a run. Not just here or there, give him starts regularly. And he will perform. He will be, it'll benefit him and the club long term, the more games he plays. But this debate is had about all young players. How much game time do you give a young player? It's an interesting one that is regularly discussed about how much game time younger players should be given, and how many English players are in the league from Premiership to League Two. There's question marks over the loan system, capping the number of overseas players on a matchday team. There's a whole range of things that have been raised in the past about where how many foreign players there should be, how many foreign players in academies there should be. And we've seen, obviously, the issues that Chelsea are now facing with the transfer ban, and they've also had their appeal rejected. Chelsea have had their appeal rejected by the FA over their transfer ban. So, or the UEFA, I think, have rejected their appeal. So Chelsea have tried to appeal their transfer ban, and it's been rejected. I think that sets a precedent now going forward. But with the Premier League, as I've said regularly on this channel, my joy of football is waning away more and more as time goes on. The older I get, the less I enjoy it, and that's an issue that football has. It is claiming it's gaining fans, and it might be gaining fans in newer markets or areas where they're growing the game or selling the TV rights to the big European leagues too. But they are actually having fans switch off for a variety of reasons. I don't like the fact that for an average person to have a Sky and BT Sports subscription, so you can watch your club on the TV, that's nearly 2 months' wages for the average worker. That sickens me. We've got to look at the fact that because I try and watch every televised FA Cup game that I can, within reason, if I can. I've looked at the live games and how many empty seats there have been at games this season. And that worries me as well. Where do I think Leicester will finish this season? It's a good question. I had this question about West Ham about 20 minutes ago about who's going to finish in that 7th spot. And I'm still going for Wolves, Watford, and then West Ham, Leicester, possibly Bournemouth. I think there's a lot of teams in there. It's going to be about how quick Brendan Rodgers can implant his vision on the team and how quickly the players buy into Brendan Rodgers. I think they're going to play a lot better under Brendan Rodgers than they did under Claude Puel. There is no doubt in that. You could not play worse under Claude Puel. and Southampton fans will tell you how bad Claude Puel is. I would say Leicester could finish, I think, ninth, eighth or ninth. I think they've misfired this season, but that's on the manager. The players have to take some responsibility, absolutely, and of course, you've had a very tough season with the helicopter crash and the aftermath of that and what happened there. But I do think Claude Puel has definitely held that team back for a long time, basically ever since they appointed him. But I think Leicester need to look at the fact that they've gone through how many managers now and how many seasons. They need some managerial stability. They need to give a manager more than a season and a bit. I think they need to, as a club, your club needs to give managers a bit more time. This is one of the reasons why I enjoy football less, is the amount of managerial turnover, the player wages as well. Football is a working class man's game, working man's game. Now you have to be a really wealthy person to be able to go regularly to watch your team play, and if you can't do that, the TV deal and the pricing of it, you have to be on a pretty top middle income wage just to be able to afford to watch it from home. So the price of football is one of the reasons why I have gone off it. But some of the shocking ownership of football clubs and the toothlessness of the FA and the EFL and the Premier League to prevent some of the chronic club mismanagement, bordering on criminal at times, is for me another reason why I have really switched off football over the years, especially in the last 10 years. The last 10 years, I think, has really summed up the negative state of the game more than the positive state of the game. I also actually think that the quality level of actual players on the field, while the fitness levels have gone up, I actually think the players are overcoached and the quality level of expressive skill players has gone down. I actually think players now are not as good quality-wise as they were 10, 20 years ago. I actually honestly believe that the style of football is not as fun. I believe that the reason why Barcelona and Spain were so dominant for that decade was not because tiki-taki is the best form of football. It really isn't. It's because the quality of football as a whole declined in that decade. The Barcelona style would have been ripped to pieces 10 years before. It only really was successful because I think the quality of football in general declined. The fitness levels have gone up. I'm not doubting that the physicality and the fitness levels have gone up. But the quality level, for me, I think is actually less than when I was younger watching the game. I honestly believe that. I think you could have some really average mid-table clubs have some superstar players. Now, I think the players are paid too much. You can be an average player and take home millions a year by being a bench warmer. You could look at Danny Drinkwater, for example, at Chelsea. He's a decent player. He worked well in that Leicester system. He's taken home how much a year for doing nothing? So that's my view on football. I think the player wages are extortionate and actually pretty sickening, to be honest. I hark back to especially the last 10 years. Financially, the average fan is not as well off in real terms as they were pre-2008. Yet football players' salaries and the transfer market's gone through the roof. And for me, that's wrong on so many levels. When you got players like Danny Rose coming out and saying, £50,000 a year, a week, sorry. I was going to say a year, that would still be enough. When you got players like Danny Rose coming out and saying 50 grand a week, that's not enough for me to live on. I need 100 grand a week. I'm going to say this to Danny Rose. Okay, you played in the Premier League. Fine, you've made it to the Premier League. It's a fair achievement. What silverware have you won to, warrant getting double your pay? Tottenham players have won sod all. Yeah, they're demanding these big salaries. I just find it really, really sickening in a sense because it's a privilege, not a right, to be a pro sportsman. It's a privilege, not a right. And a lot of these players have lost their, humble side of where they're from. A lot of them are from working class to middle class backgrounds where the salaries and wages aren't great. A lot of them do come from urban poverty, as I'll call it. They do. And they've lost connection with their working middle class roots, for example, because rugby players are going the same way. And they've lost that connection with where they came from to what they are. And while I don't doubt that, sports would need to get paid and get paid a decent wage. Some of the wages and some of their antics when they're getting paid this money is sickening. Who I think is going to win the Champions League? That my friend, that is an open-ended question because Man United have just pulled off the impossible comeback. Real Madrid are out and embarrassed by Ajax, so you can't underestimate Ajax. That is an open-ended question because not all of the Champions League ties have been done at this round, but it does open. I think it's more open than last year. I honestly think it is far more open than last year. I think it is anyone's game. At this point, I think it's too early to say that team is going to win or that team is going to win. I think the semi-finals will give us an idea. When we get to the semi-final stage, I can then possibly give you my view on who's going to win it. But I haven't really followed it religiously this season. I'm trying to follow football less and other sports more, which is ironic, really, considering the majority of my videos on this channel are football. But I think it's too soon to say who we think is going to win. There have been some real shock results and some teams that have gone out that were expected to go further. So in that kind of aspect of things, I think wait till the semi-finals and then ask the question again. You'll more likely get an answer. At this point, I think it's too early because I think sports become so unpredictable in the last few years that any kind of prediction on a sporting event is like trying to find a needle in a haystack of needles. Yeah, that's my best analogy on that one. I mean, I've tried to predict some scores on the Premier League last season. Just on one weekend, I got one score out of 10 fixtures right. And I say this when people are saying, "Oh, I can predict scores" or the score predictor, and they get more than 70%. I think to myself, match fixing. That's how cynical I've become because of all the match fixing scandals that have come out, bribery scandals in football that have come out. And I think that's partly where my love for football's disappearing is the amount of scandal that the sport has had in recent years, and the amount of negative press, and then the players don't help when high-paid football players do silly things. What club do I support? I for my sins, I will say this for my sins. I am a Blackburn Rovers fan, and I have been since 1992. So yeah, since I was 3 years old. So I have some issues there. I really need to get medical attention, I think. And we had such a good start to the season, and now we've just fallen away like I thought we would, but it's what it is. I'm glad that the club is no longer in League One because that really was an embarrassment to be that low in the Football League pyramid. But that's down to poor ownership, and I come back to the poor ownership having a massive impact on football and the fact that I enjoy it less. I've enjoyed football a lot less in recent years. I've gone more to watching rugby union and rugby league and ice hockey more over the last few years, and I enjoy those sports more. Partly because the players are paid on average a hell of a lot less, and partly they seem when you actually meet the players, if you actually meet a player, whatever level of rugby or football or ice hockey that they play, they seem more down to earth. They seem more humble. They seem more respectful. They seem, they are paid a lot less. And I think that shows in how they come across as people. But that is what it is. I mean, I've even raised the question: Does football need like a spending or salary cap? Because financial fair play. Now I'm going to look at this, okay, and this is where the whiteboard comes into play. And I'm going to get my pens out and do some doodling. Yes, I do that. I'm going to go with purple because purple is a nice dark color that can be seen on the board. So in football, we have this. We have a thing brought in by UEFA called financial fair play. That is UEFA and their equivalent of a salary cap. Thing is, it's not a salary cap. It's a percentage of earnings that the club can spend or something. It's something that makes all clubs profitable. It's a percentage of earnings that you can then spend on things like that. It's a complicated system that in reality needs to be simplified and transparent, and it's not. Now, I'm going to put a few other leagues up here. I'm going to put Super League because we all know what Super League is because we're all rugby league fans here. He says Super League, AFL, NFL. Because CFL is also North American football, just a different rule variation. All these sports have various forms of salary cap. Now, there are two forms of salary cap. You've got soft and hard cap. Okay, so you've just turned 20 and you've been going home and away. Okay, so that's 10 years of support of a club. I will get back to this point. I'm just setting up, but look, at the end of the day, it does cost a lot of money to go to games. It does cost a lot of money to get to games as well. It's not just the ticket price; it's the food, it's the drink, it's the transport, it's the possible if you've got to stay in a hotel or B&B or a campsite overnight. I've done away days. I know how exceptionally expensive they are, and they are exceptionally expensive. And this is where things like this come in. The cost of the sport. Now, I've missed a load of sports out that have salary cap, and I'm going to get onto this because the fact you said you've been going to football for 10 years. This comes into it, is the cost. Now, financial fair play is UEFA's version of controlling how much clubs are allowed to spend. These leagues, I've missed out loads. I've missed out the NBA. I've got to put the NBA in there. Major League Baseball. Now, here's a football league that does have it. The MLS, and then you've got the MLR, which is Major League Rugby. All these sports, well, these leagues and sports have salary caps. Now, there are various rules for these salary caps. Okay, various rules. And they vary between, soft, hard. But all these leagues are very, very open with the salary cap structures that they have. The actual complex running of them is a bit more difficult, but they've all, in the last 20 years, gone, we need this. We need to keep costs down or controlled. We need to control how much our players are paid. The ironic thing is, with the NHL, the players have never been paid more. The clubs have never made more money, and the ticket prices keep going up. The NRL and Super League, well known for having salary cap breaches. The AFL and the NRL in Australia, they led the way with salary caps. NBA's got a salary cap, which was brought in the 80s, one of the longest running salary caps. And actually, since it's been in, there's been very few salary cap breaches. Major League Baseball, they've got their own scandals. The NFL, CFL, they have cap systems. Again, long-standing. And all these leagues have this. One of the reasons why Super League has actually managed to get a salary cap structure, whereas other European-based sports leagues haven't, is the Super League brought in their salary cap before the EU law on salary caps was introduced. Yeah. So the Super League managed to get around EU employment law a little bit. But EU employment law pretty much prohibits a cap on salaries because it's deemed to be uncompetitive. Yeah, it's deemed to be reducing competitiveness. And although in sport, it actually makes the sport more competitive. So the EU, stupid. Now, UEFA have got financial fair play. It doesn't work. It's been proven not to work for forever. UEFA have come out and says it doesn't work. When the governing body that brings the salary cap sort of financial system in place is openly saying it doesn't work, it's never worked efficiently, it's never worked properly, it's flawed, there's no trust. The issue here is these leagues, these players are getting paid more than they ever have. But the important thing is most of the clubs, if not all the clubs in the leagues, are actually making money. Very few of the teams in these leagues are actually running at a loss. Football, about 60% plus of teams are running at a loss. Salary cap systems, it's a lot less. And that's an argument for it, because the amount of clubs we have seen where the player wages are unsustainable, which means those clubs that can't afford those wages of the bigger clubs have two choices. They can become a seller and have no success, or they go all in and splurge a lot of money in a short space of time to try and win that one trophy to then build more success upon. Hence, clubs hitting issues with finances. The thing is, I think European football's too far down the line for a salary cap. I think it's got to the point now where the wages are too high as a starting base. The average wage is too high on a starting base. Clubs will resist. The damage has been done. But the salary cap is an interesting thing that I've looked at and posed the question that, could we or should we have a salary cap in European football? I said yes, we should, but I think it's 10, 20 years too late. We should have been down this road in the late 90s. I think football has got to the point now where it's going to collapse in on itself financially, and the consequences of the financial collapse that is pending, because how football has avoided financial boom and bust, I have no idea. In the grand scheme of things, I don't know how long it can continue. But with the salary cap comes into ticket pricing, how expensive it is to go to and from games, how expensive it is to buy food and drink at games, season tickets, travel costs. Are there agreements with local travel companies to give discounted travel for fans, for example? A whole host of issues, whole host. And the fact you've been going for 10 years, that's a lot of money. I'm gonna pose this question to you. I want you to ask your family to approximate how much money they've spent in the last 10 years going to home and away games for Leicester in all the leagues they've been in, Premier League, Championship. I believe were Leicester in League One at one point. You have to ask your family how much, as a family, you have spent in a decade following your club, and then feel happy. It doesn't matter if it's a rugby union video, rugby league video, ice hockey, whatever video it is that I'm doing in the next few days, put it in the comments. It's cost me this much to go to a game. I've worked out it cost me this much to go to X amount of games per season, and here's the approximate cost that we worked out. And then I can say to you, is that sustainable? And then you've got to look at how much you earn, how much your family earn, and you've got to ask yourself, is that sustainable to go regularly, or I'm only going to be able to go once or twice a season? Because this is where I think football has got it wrong, and other sports are starting to get it wrong. I've got a lot of subscribers in North America who are NHL fans, and some of them can only go to a game once or twice a year. I've been invited by subscribers that in the next couple of years, when I get my passport sorted out, to go to Canada and the US, and I've asked how much does it cost for an average ticket. It costs more than my flight to the US and Canada, and more than my hotel stay. Yeah, some of the ticket prices, we're talking nearly a couple of $1,000s. Work that out into pounds for one game or a series of games, a couple of games. That is a lot of money. Other games, they lower the prices to $15, $20, but on an average, it is a lot of money. A friend of mine went to see a Chelsea game a couple of seasons ago in a 24-hour period, because he decided to stay in London because he had a bit of drink. He didn't want to drive. He booked a last-minute hotel. For ticket, food, drink, and parking, we're talking nearly £600 for one ticket. So again, it depends on where you sit in the stadium. I think there needs to be universal ticketing pricing, to be brutally honest. But we've seen this season the EFL say we're capping away ticket prices. Of course, what's going to happen from next season is all the clubs are going to raise their ticket price to the minimum cap, and then go, yeah, we've capped it, but you've just raised the price. But yeah, the cap doesn't come in for 6 months. That's what they're going to do. But it's going to be interesting to see how much you've actually spent a year, or how much on average a year, because you're going to average it out. Of course, ticket prices will fluctuate with the league you are in and the league position, but it will be interesting to see how much has actually been spent on football tickets by you and your family in 10 years. And then you can work out, is that sustainable for the next 10 years, for example? And then you can go, wow. Yeah. This is where I think football has lost it, because the players are getting paid so much now. The ticket price is part of the reason why they're getting paid so much. But also, you've got to look at the TV deals that are in place, both the current one and the future one. They could let us in for less than a tenner and still turn a massive profit. And a couple of years, I think 2 years ago, they could have let us in for free half the clubs in the Premier League, and they would have made the massive profits that they did. So that's where I've lost my love to a certain extent. And the more it carries on like that, the less I enjoy the sport. And it's a shame for me to say that. I feel bad saying that, but it's the truth. Rugby union and rugby league are starting to go the same way with really prohibitive TV deals where there's a paywall in the way, so it makes it harder to access. And their ticket prices are going up as well because players are wanting to get paid more money, which has had you got to look at the effect in Wales, for example, in the Pro 14, with their 4 teams struggling financially. Yes, they have an agreement with Premier Free Sports. Free Sports is free. Premier Sports you have to pay for, and you already have to have a Sky Sports subscription to get Premier Sports. That's another issue. So you have to pay for a subscription and then another subscription, which is wrong. That's a double paywall. And they wonder why fans are staying away from stadiums, why they're not drawing, why teams are struggling to turn a profit. Take down the pay barriers, make the game more accessible. You will have more participation and more support. It's a known thing. It boggles belief. And you've also got to ask the fact, okay, you've got to look at the pay-per-view sport and then look at the free-to-air stuff. The TV audience for the free-to-air sport equivalent of the pay-per-view same game, no contest, none. I think the Man United-Chelsea game got nearly, 7 million, 8 million viewers. The World Cup, England-Colombia penalty shootout got over 23.4 million viewers. You put that behind a paywall, you're averaging about 100 to 200,000 viewers at a push. I think the Man United Arsenal game had more viewers than Man United Chelsea by about 400,000, but it was still near 8 million. There's not 8 million Man United and Arsenal fans in the country, but people want to see good quality football, and they did. The equivalent Arsenal Tottenham North London derby last season on BT Sport, 90,000 viewers. Yeah, subscription sport is killing sport. It's killing sport because when that TV company doesn't want to bid for those rights or gets outbid for those rights, it creates more problems down the line. It creates a whole host of issues down the line. And TV companies, I've discussed this before with when I did my Major League Rugby video recently about the broadcasters. The fact that I wouldn't say they desperately need Premier League tier football on free TV. I think they could do one game a weekend where every club has at least one home and one away game in the season, which would work out as every club having a home game. I think you could have 20 weekends or 20 matches in the season where every club has a home game broadcast on free-to-air TV as the match of the day with the highlights shown afterwards. I think that is perfectly reasonable, but Sky and to a certain extent, well, BT's been propped up by one of the biggest telecommunications companies in the world, but Sky with Comcast taking over, I have concerns because Comcast has a really poor reputation in the US as well. I think that you have to limit the amount of free-to-air TV each club gets. One home game per team per season. And the home club gets the majority of that revenue of that game. 70-30. Simple. It won't happen, of course, because the Premier League are greedy. The clubs are greedy, and fans are an afterthought. That's my personal opinion. It's not just my personal opinion; it's a lot of people's opinion. You just have to look at the viewership numbers of the free-to-air games that are accessible. Be it the Six Nations Rugby Union, the rugby games that have been shown on Channel 4 and Channel 5 this season, the FA Cup games that have been shown. The footage on Free Sports, the Pro League games on Free Sports, their viewership figures are higher than Premier Sports because there's no paywall in the way. It's a no-brainer. It increases participation and viewership. It participates people going, I can watch one game every couple of weeks. I might go to the next home game because it's not on TV, but I like the product. I want to go to the next home game. And it actually, increases involvement. We have an issue with wages not keeping up with inflation. We have an issue with the sports stars getting paid more and more every year, whereas the average fan isn't. And yeah, BT Sport is an absolute cancer. As a BT customer, I was going to get it free for 18 months. I got it free for 3 days. But after watching it for 30 minutes with Austin Healey doing his rugby presentation, I was glad I didn't have to pay for that shit. because they've got some really, 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 really bad pundits. They make Match the Day with Ian Wright look professional, and that's painful to say, but it's true. I've watched some of BT Sports rugby coverage. I am very disappointed, especially when commentators can't get players' names correct, even though the week before they got the name correct. It just shows really cheap, crappy journalism where you can't even research and actually ask the player, how do you pronounce your name? I don't want to get it wrong on TV. How do you pronounce your name? When they can't get name pronunciation or even get the player's name right, it's cheap. It's crap. I mean, having Ben Kay as a commentator, I just want to gouge my ears out. It's just some great players do not make great media personalities. They really don't. The only good guy they had on BT Sport was Jacques Berger in the guest tackle spot. When they got Jacques Berger to do some media stuff to do with the Premiership, what was the Guinness Premiership. Jacques Berger, the Namibian ex-international, great player, great role model. Looked like a Picasso masterpiece, the amount of broken bones he had, but he's a great player. He was doing a piece on tackle technique, and it was really, really informative. But it was what it was. Sky, yeah, no, they have gone the route, but Free Sports, Premier Sports show the NHL, but they get limited NHL coverage. So I think they get the game of the night. So they don't show every single NHL game. They show, I think, 3 games a week on Premier Sports, and occasionally you get them on Free Sports as well. If there is 2 games of the night on, or they've got that matinee game, they'll put it on Free Sports if there's no rugby league or rugby union to show. So you can get the NHL on Premier Free Sports, which is good. But Sky, yeah, Comcast is American. They've bought Sky in this country. I don't know what Comcast are going to do, but Comcast are not a great media provider. They're shocking. Yeah, but the Americans, they have more disposable income, and they have more broadcasters to choose from for free to wear and subscription. They have a much more healthy, open media market than we do. There is no monopoly on sports. You have regional broadcasters like Fox will cover the sports in one area. ESPN and CBS are the carriers for Major League Rugby, for example. So there are some leagues that have broadcast deals with across the whole nation, and there are others that also have. So Major League Rugby has an agreement with CBS, but also has agreements with regional broadcasters as well on the old cable and subscription networks to also dual carry games on more than one network. But no, the American TV market is far more open, and you have more choice. If you don't want to watch ESPN, whack it onto NBC. If you don't want to watch NBC, whack it on a Fox, and you can still find. Also, you get the NHL Centre Ice package where you can watch every game. You can get it over here, but it costs you an arm and a leg. When I say an arm and a leg, that's like a month's wages just to get it. It's mad. But also the problem is they've oversaturated the market with almost every Premier League game televised. They have oversaturated the market. They've put too much on, and people are switching off. People don't want to pay for subscription sport. It's a dying model. Free to wear is the way to go. It's the logical way to go, and free streaming online because you still get advertising revenue. I do not understand why they don't. Yeah, look, I'm old enough to remember the collapse of ITV Sport, as in when they had that sports brand. I remember the collapse of Setanta, ESPN trying to fill the gap for Setanta getting bought by Disney. There are a whole host of. I remember when Eurosport. I actually remember when Eurosport was free to wear. Now you have to pay for it. Eurosport made a mistake. Eurosport, you can only get on Sky now. You used to be able to get that free to wear. I used to love Eurosport. I still do, but the fact you have to pay a subscription now, I don't like that. Unless you get it on Sky, I don't like that. That's wrong. I think they shot themselves in the foot because they covered more than just British sport. They covered sport that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. And I was watching the World Championship Moto GP motocross, the motocross World Championship, Moto X2 and Moto XGP. And yeah, it was a rerun of what happened last weekend, but I managed to watch like the opening rounds of the Motocross World Championship, and I wouldn't have got that on Sky. I wouldn't have got that on BT Sport. Because BT Sport and Sky have a really weird issue when it comes to motorsport, unless it's F1, which no one cares about because it's just a traffic jam. But I do think Sky have gone downhill. I think they had an opportunity to. I think they went downhill when they lost the rugby and the Champions League. A lot of the rights to the rugby and Champions League, and they lost that to BT. That summed up the state of British broadcasting. I think that in general, broadcasting in general has gone downhill in the last decade for a variety of reasons. I think they've dumbed it down. I think the quality of journalism is worse. And I'm being honest. I think the quality of journalism, Dan Rowan at the BBC, that's just tacky journalism. Some of the things he's come out with, and he is tacky. Oh no, I love the British touring cars, which for a motorsport series is free to air in its entirety on ITV4 from April onwards. So the season starts in like 3-4 weeks. I will be watching that. And it may not be the best motorsport series in the world, but my God, it's wheel to wheel. There is none of this procession. They will go wheel to wheel, and yeah, there's a lot of crashes, but they will go wheel to wheel as well. You might have 10 overtakes and a lap for the lead. I'm not joking. I like touring car racing. I like NASCAR because NASCAR they pile up all the time, and it's more open. NASCAR is more open. They stream it to the US market on YouTube, and then a day after they'll post both the Infinity series and the full Monster Energy series on YouTube, full race rewatch with nothing missing, with the ad breaks taken out. So you can access it far easier than anything else. Oh God, the Super League wouldn't work. The European Super League, no, it wouldn't work. You lose all your rivalries with your local clubs. Because Man United, if they were to join it, for example, and Man City, they lose the rivalries with Everton. They'll lose rivalries depending because, admittedly, Burnley are in the Premier League, Blackburn are at the moment, but they traditionally don't like the teams from Manchester. You've got Bury, you've got Bolton. If they were to become better clubs and go up the football pyramid or whatever happens, you lose that. You'll lose the Merseyside derby between Everton and Liverpool. You lose. You'll lose. I don't know, some of the London derbies, for example. You'll lose a whole and the fans don't want it. The ticket. You got to look at what the ticket price would be. It would be silly. It'll be like a month's wages for a ticket. It'd be for the rich only. It'll be for the playboys and the rich, and that's not what football is about. That's not what sport's about. The Super League, they've tried it with other sports as well. Look at the Australian Rugby League. The Super League Wars. It was called that, the Super League Wars. Rupert Murdoch, he wanted to control the TV rights. He kicked up a fuss, started his own breakaway league, and basically for the mid-90s till I think the mid-2000s, the British Super League, which he also set up, which has actually done more to damage rugby league in this country than aid it, because the season's gone from winter to summer, which I do agree with because it works with the Australian league. Rupert Murdoch damn near killed rugby league in the mid-90s. That's why Australians don't like him. He nearly killed, and he actually was involved in the running of rugby league until 2012. He was on the board. So Rupert Murdoch is a scummy bastard. Oh, yeah, I swore. Yeah, no, Rupert Murdoch is a scummy bastard. Australians don't like him. We don't like him. He's lost control of his grubby company, Sky. And I think I'm worried about how Comcast are going to reconfigure Sky, especially the sports side of it, because one of my favorite YouTubers is American. He's a gamer. He does all the video game things. And yesterday, his internet completely crashed in his live stream about 8-9 times in the space of an hour. But then we started debating how much we were paying for our internet and what bandwidth we were on. And for an average package for Comcast in Atlanta, Georgia, he's on like nearly $400 a month. That's why I'm worried with Comcast. Not because it's not Rupert Murdoch. It's how much is it going to cost? Because I believe it should be free to air. I believe the whole Sky network, everything on a Sky box, should be available to everyone. Because the BBC are the ones who give the operating licenses out. BBC's free to air, allegedly. So I do think it should be accessible for all, not just for those who can, because there's what 18 million people who don't have a Sky subscription or Sky Sports subscription or a sports subscription in this country, and that's why free sports exists, and that's why free sports is growing and getting more sports on free sports, including more mainstream sports. So I do think, I've been illegally streaming for years. I've found websites where, okay, admittedly the game might be up a day or two late, but I can watch the game without pissing ads. Why would I want to pay for a subscription service where there are still adverts in it? That makes no sense to me. If I'm paying for a subscription service, I should be paying for ad-free TV. That's what the license fee is all about. That's why you get ad-free TV for the BBC, because you pay for the license fee, right? Sky, it's a load of bull. You're paying to get a channel that's then half the time is actually adverts, and it actually is. If you look at the ad breaks on Sky-based programming over domestic terrestrial free-to-air commercial TV, there are ad breaks are more frequent. They're more frequent and they're longer. The one thing I will say this is I think True Movies as a movie channel, which you can get free to air, it actually says in the little corner of the TV screen, it tells you how long that particular ad break is going to be. And I like that. That I know I've got 5 minutes to get a drink, not watch any of this crap, so I can channel hop for 5 minutes and find a program that hasn't got an ad break on, and then come back. And yeah, the amount of money they spend on trying to shut down all these VPNs is mad. I'm starting to get angry with YouTube's advertising, where they're doubling up ads, and some of those ads aren't skippable. I think mid-roll ads are annoying. I think YouTube needs to look at how they place ads in videos, because when I was monetized last year, I could choose when I got the ad breaks, and I clicked no mid-roll ads. I turned that off because I knew people would either switch off the video that they're watching of me, and they were going to skip anyway. And it would disrupt the flow of my video, and I was proven right. So I switched mid-roll ads off, which means I actually earn less ad revenue, but I keep up audience retention for longer. Yeah. Certain ads I actually do find quite entertaining, but it's targeted advertising. What I find really annoying is when I'm watching a sports broadcast and I have a non-sports based ad come up. It's like, well, that's not your target audience. I don't want to buy makeup. I'm a bloke who's watching rugby union. I want to buy the new Adidas rugby boot, for example, sports drink, sports clothing. That would be a targeted ad. This is where they got to look at the programs they got. Also, betting ads. I'm seeing a lot of them, especially late at night. There, people are bombarded with them. I go around my mates in Maidenhead. He's got Sky, so I can watch free sports on his Sky subscription, and I can watch Eurosport, which I can't do because I don't have a Sky subscription. After 9 p.m, a third of the ads are gambling ads. You've got Discovery Channel is sponsored by Ladbrokes. I'm like, Discovery Channel, so documentaries about history and science and I don't know, literature or whatever it may be. And those what is it? What's the thing? Reality TV ones, they follow a group of engineers around or a company around, like ice road truckers, for example. Why the hell is that being advertised with gambling? Why? Why is that sponsored by gambling? It's mad. I do think more football fans care more about their club than their country. I think that's a general rule. I really do. It's a known fact. The club-country debate, be it players being made available or fans wanting their club to win more over their country, it's a known thing, and has been for a while. The fusion of gambling and sports, yes. The only sports that will be exempt from the gambling ad change at the end of this month, I believe, will be horse racing and I think greyhound racing, and I think possibly snooker. But with the amount of match fixing scandals coming out in snooker, I think that's not good. I think you'll find the Championship clubs and Premier League. Yeah, that is a concern. Look at League One and League Two as well. The amount of gambling firms, there's a lot of them, and it is worrying because gambling addiction is a big thing. We've had a lot of match fixing scandals in the last 13 years since the Italian match fixing scandal of 2006 broke, which had been going on for years. But when the scandal was made public this time 13 years ago, the rise in gambling ads and sponsorship of events, it is worrying. Yeah, America has fully legalized sports gambling and gambling across the country, because before you could only gamble in licensed casinos and in the state of Nevada. So you've got Vegas and Reno in Nevada, the two big gambling cities in Nevada. But you had Atlantic City, you had certain casinos in certain cities around the US, and they fully legalized it for every state and every county to decide on a case by case merit whether to have casinos. The gambling as well, yeah, they've legalized betting shops. They are 50 years behind, but I think the issue with the US was the organized crime links with the gambling over there. Considering that, I think before the 1930s, 1920s, or something like that, there were craps tables and what we would now call casinos in saloons. Gambling was not illegal, but at the time of Prohibition, they also cracked down on gambling because of the links to organised crime, and it's taken them a very long time to legalise and regulate, and that's an issue as well, is the regulation. I've got nothing wrong with legalised gambling and betting shops. I've got nothing against that. It's the slot machines. It's not having a little tipple on a football club on your accumulator. I have no issue with that as long as it's not shoved down my throat. I have no issue with having a flutter on the horses. I used to gamble every year on the Grand National and the Cheltenham Gold Cup and Royal Ascot. I do not do that anymore. I've stopped on the Grand National. I mean, I won on the Grand National 8 years in a row. I won money, but I've stopped. I've won a lot of money gambling on horses, but I've stopped. Not because I wasn't good at gambling, because I used to be a semi-pro poker player. I just had issues with addiction, and gambling is an addiction. I wasn't a gambling addict, but I had issues with drugs and alcohol, and the next, it could have got really out of control, and I just stopped doing it when I saw some of my friends really spiral out of control, and I thought, nah, this is done for me. I'm done with this. I don't enjoy it anymore. It's really, I've lost my love for it. What I don't like is the fact you can bet on anything now. So this is where match fixing and spot fixing is really in the public consciousness. Actually, I did end up a crackhead, so you hoped I wasn't, but I was. When it comes to sport and gambling, though, where you can now bet on how many penalties a team are going to give away in rugby, or how many free kicks a football team are going to get when the first yellow card is, that is really concerning. Really concerning. Betting on the result, it's only going to be 3-1, but not when the goals are scored, you see. When you're going to bet, okay, we're going to have a goal. I'm going to try and break this down. So, don't have a problem. Okay, this is the result. Okay. Let's say I bet on a 3-1. Let's say I bet on 3-1. That's fine. But you can also bet on a moment in-game. Also known as spot betting. Spot betting is where match fixing comes from. I don't agree with spot betting, where you can say there's going to be 9 yellow cards. The first yellow card is going to happen on 17 minutes. There's going to be an own goal by a centre-back at 83 minutes. That is where you can throw games. And it's so obvious when a match is being fixed. So obvious. So if that was going to be a 3-1 game, and I bet on a 3-1, and it comes back it's 3-2, bugger me, I haven't got my accumulator. But if I bet just to win, let's just say I want Blackburn to beat Bolton 3-1. But I just bet I'll have Blackburn to win. Simple bet. Just Blackburn to win. Sod the score. I win. But when I start predicting it's going to be a 3-1 and the score is 3-1, I double win. When I then say, Bradley Dack's going to get a hat-trick in the first half, in a 3-1 for Blackburn to win, come on, that's getting a little bit suspicious. That's where match fixing is made easier, and the betting companies have enabled it. Now, the betting companies do have a system where if they see a suspicious betting pattern, let's say let's say we'll go with Blackburn v Bolton because they're both in the same league and they're both rivals. Okay, it's a rival game. It's a rivalry. It's a derby match. We'll go for 3-1. We'll give a couple of options of possible scores. Okay, and we'll say possibility of a 1-1, 1-0, and we'll go for a scoreless draw. Okay, these are the four options. In theory, it should be even spread. It should be an even spread in theory, unless you're really looking at the form book and you're in advanced stats. But the general better, it will be about 20 to 25% on all of them, in theory. If that's the four options that you're given on betting slip, for example, that should be what it is. The thing is, when let's say the 1-0 gets 90% in let's say 10 minutes pre-match. Let's say 90% of bettors put that bet in not long before the game starts. That's a suspicious bet, especially when it's been an average of about 20-25% on all outcomes. However outlandish, when there's suddenly a big surge for that particular scoreline, that's mad. That's when you go, that's a really suspicious betting pattern. Especially when the odds on that at the start of the day were really long. And people say, that's 100 to 1 odds. I'm going to bet all on 1-0. That's when you go, that's a suspicious betting pattern. It's a simplified way of saying, how they can work out that something's not right. I watched a couple of documentaries over Christmas to do with match fixing, and it is really, really disturbing how open to abuse that is. Yes, the guy who ate the pie in the FA Cup game last season, he did get in a lot of trouble for that, and that was a bet that he would eat a pie on 86 minutes. And what did he do? He ate a pie on 86 minutes. So yeah, that's a spot fix. Silly that it may be, that is a spot fix because you are also trying to cheat the gambling company and other gamblers out of possibly winning a bet by fixing an outcome in a game or of a game. And that's where these bet in play now ads I don't like. I don't like betting in play. I do not like it. You should go if you're going to say, right, you've got, let's say you've got a 10 game. I hate accumulators, ACCA. I hate these. I really hate accumulators. Let's say you've got a 1-0, 2-1, a 3-3, a 0-0. That's 4. You've got a 2-2, another 2-1, a 1-3. Because I'm going to give some away teams some wins here. That's 2, 4, 6, 7. A 0-4. Yeah, someone got a thumping. For example, that's 2, 4, 6, 8. And we'll go for a 0-0 and a 0-1. I'm giving some away teams some wins here. The accumulator bet. I don't like these. I really don't. I really don't like these. I don't like them. And yeah, you could put down a load of that and you can tick them off. Oh yeah. Bang, bang, bang. And the more you get on the accumulator, the more you win. Bang, bang. Oh no, I didn't win that one. My cousin had a gambling addiction because of accumulators on the old footy. Massive, massive problem. Massive problem. He nearly won 100 grand on an accumulator, but he spent most of his wages gambling. Most of his wages. And he came up to visit me once, and his old man said, like, make sure he doesn't go down a betting shop. I don't think it's a waste of money. I think if you're doing it every now and then as a casual bet, let's say on a big game, having a flutter on the FA Cup final, which could be a family tradition. You just have a flutter on the FA Cup final. You place a bet on the World Cup final every 4 years. Something like that, it's not a problem. It's when you're doing it every match day, a daily basis. It's an issue. It is an issue because professional gamblers are good at what they do because they read the market. It's basically like financial markets on the FTSE. It's basically what professional gambling is. But when you're going every day on the slot machines, that's a problem. If you're betting on the horses once a month with your paycheck, and you go out and go, right, I'm only going to bet on the 3:30 at Wolverhampton. I'm gonna here's my 20 quid. I'm gonna bet with this. If I walk out with more than 20 on the weekend on my payday, I take 20 quid out, go down to the betting shop. I've won 200 quid. You walk away. As soon as you get to the point where you start to lose more than you win, you got to walk away. I wouldn't say casual betting's problem. It's addictive betting. That's the issue, and there is a proportion of people who have an addictive personality, and I am one of them, who are deemed more at risk. And yeah, I have the occasional flutter. I haven't bet for bookies for a couple of years. On a fruit machine, I have if I've got a bit of change and I'm in a pub and I can't be asked to carry around a load of like 50p's and £1 coins. If I've got like about a fiver in change, maybe once every couple of months, I'll put it in a fruity and have a little spin. And occasionally, I actually win big. I'm actually quite good with fruities as a track record, but I don't do that often. I do that very rarely when I'm bored, especially if the pub's pretty quiet. Let's say I've paid for a beer in a £5 note. I get a couple of quid change. I haven't got enough for another beer, but there's a fruit machine there. I will, chuck a little bit of change in there and just go, let's just have a little go. But it's not something that I enjoy doing. I've got a few friends who have gambling problems, and yeah, I've seen the damage that especially sports gambling can do, because I've got some mates who will spend 400 or 500 quid down the bookies on the horses and not win any of it back, and that could be a week's wages for them, or 2 weeks' wages, their pension, whatever it may be, and they've spent it all. And I'm just like, I know that guy. I drink with that guy. I've been to the horse racing with that guy. I've had laughs with that guy. I've gone to the boxing with that guy. There's some I call him my pub lot. We're a wide group of men and women of a variety of ages, from like 18 to 60. We go to the horse racing together. We go to we've gone to football matches together, cricket, rugby, you name it. We as a group do group things on a day out, but even if you're a well-off person, you can still get into debt. You can still have debt. A lot of football players have got into gambling debt. It's very interesting how we've got into gambling, but the sponsorship of sport with gambling, I think, is a problem. There are rules about players and are they allowed to gamble. And the amount of players who breached league gambling rules is really high. It's a lot higher than is publicly admitted by the clubs. The clubs would rather they didn't admit to how many of their players have gambling problems. The amount of players who've come out post-retirement and said, yeah, we had gambling syndicates within the dressing room of a variety of things for silly bets, like how many shots of tequila could a guy drink on a weekend in a session, to how many fouls a certain player would give away, or how many shots on target a player would have on the opposition team. Also, just little things like that, with just a couple of fivers in each hand, can then start to go on to bigger things. I mean, there was an ice hockey one called Operation Slapshot, where Wayne Gretzky got caught up in a betting ring with his former teammate Rick Tocchet, who's now the coach of the Arizona Coyotes in the NHL. He was caught up in a gambling sting, match fixing investigation in the US to do with organised crime. There was the NBA, Tim Donaghy, the NBA referee who was done for match fixing, who even came out and said there was a gambling culture with officials, players, and team owners had gambling syndicates. So yeah, gambling in sports has got a track record of problems. It's nothing new. It goes back a very long way, very, very long way. There's nothing new about it. It's a long-term, long-standing thing. the fact that it's now been fully legalized across the US is very, very, very interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see how it affects sport in the North America, especially in the US. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, you've got to look at the amount of match fixing scandals here in Europe when it comes to especially football. But you've also got to look at the amount of scandals that involve gambling or players, individual players getting suspended for gambling offences in not just football, but a lot of sports. And we've had legalised regulated gambling here for 50 years with betting shops. So that's going to be interesting to see what then happens with the US. No, I did not bet on McGregor Mayweather because I found it a piss take of boxing. It was a joke. It was a disgusting joke, and McGregor is now the richest loser in history. So that's what I'm going to say on that one. I found it embarrassing that that fight was organised, and then I found it more embarrassing that Mayweather had the fight with the Japanese kickboxer that was organised as well. That was a mockery of both MMA and boxing, and it was an embarrassment to professional sport because there's those professionals who are MMA fighters or are boxers who are busting a gut at the lower levels, not getting paid a lot of money in prize money, whose health they put their health on the line, and they suffer some terrible injuries. They may not make it, and they die young, trying to get to the level that McGregor and Mayweather are at. But you got to look at MMA, boxing, kickboxing, and the amount of ex fighters who die young and die with Parkinson's and other brain related illnesses. They're not looked after when they retire. 90% don't make it to the top level, who are basically they're journeymen. They're going from fight to fight, earning a pittance. I wouldn't say UFC is nothing without McGregor. I would say he's tarnished the reputation of UFC. But Dana White, as a commissioner, you could say UFC is nothing without him. But then he's a dodgy character as well. I think if I was to really follow a promotion, it'd be Bellator. It just seems the Bellator fighters seem to be more respectful when it comes to their media appearances, to each other, to the fans. They seem, because they're earning less money, they just seem overall better rounded individuals. I think UFC's got a culture of a toxic culture, and it goes way before McGregor. There were loads of UFC fighters who've done far worse than McGregor, who were still allowed to fight. UFC as a brand is a toxic brand. McGregor, yeah, he's been a big part of how big it's got, but I don't know. Best British boxer right now. Well, De Gale's just retired, and fair play to De Gale for going as long as he did. You've got Tony Bellew in there. There's quite a few fighters who've just recently retired or still boxing. I think Tyson Fury's on a road to redemption. I'm not a big fan of Tyson Fury personally, for some of his personal comments and personal views, but the fact he's been very open about his issues with mental health and drug problems, yet they threw him under the bus. This is, I think, why people don't come out with these issues and say that I have a problem, is because the way they are treated, especially if they're high-profile sportsmen. I prefer Fury over Joshua. I really do. I think while he has made some controversial comments and he's done some controversial things, with what we now know about his mental health, it's more understandable. Anthony Joshua, you've got Chris Eubank Jr. There are a host of boxers, but I think boxing as a sport is in real problems. I think there are issues with boxing as a sport. I think there's a lot of issues with the governance. We've had a lot of fighters die recently, young, who are still registered fighters. There's a lot of issues with boxing right now that I think boxing needs to confront, and I don't think it is. But when Tyson Fury came out and was very candid and open about the issues he's faced with mental health and drug problems, yeah, he was thrown under the bus. Absolutely. The sport that he's given his life for treated him like shit. The media threw him under the bus. And it was very brave of him to come out and say, look, I am struggling with my mental health and drug addiction. The amount of sportsmen who don't come out and admit they have a problem with their mental health and drug addiction, who then get caught, is because of people like Tyson Fury coming out and saying, look, I have a problem. and the sport that has basically, I wouldn't call him a wage slave, but basically, um, he's given a gut, he's given an arm and a leg for that. He's done the hard work. He's done all this hard work to help make the sport what it is, but the sport doesn't give back. The sport needs to look after its athletes a lot better, especially when they come out and say that they have problems and are very open. More often than not, they get thrown under the bus and they're painted as pariahs when they shouldn't be. I wouldn't say all the British public likes Tyson Fury because I personally, on a personal level, with some of the things, some of his views and some things he said, I don't agree with. But I feel a lot of respect for him because of his battles with mental health and drug addiction. And I think, while he's not the best example of someone to be an advocate for more mental health and drug reform because of some of his other views, I think we need more people like him who are brave enough to come out and say, look, this is an issue, not just that he suffers from it, but this is an issue within professional sport, and it is. And I think that needs to be addressed more. And yes, he does want to fight at Old Trafford, and putting boxing matches in football stadiums, I'm not a big fan of, but that's my personal opinion as well. English rugby was 2015 World Cup. I've had a lot of criticism for some of my rugby videos lately, mostly from Welsh fans, ironically, and they've come out as a very toxic fan base. And I'm saying that honestly, I don't give a toss if people watch this later on and give this the thumbs down. There's a minority of Welsh fans that are exceptionally toxic. They can't accept criticism of their beloved Welsh national side, but they don't give a toss about their club game, which is in disarray. So without the club game, the national side will struggle long term. And the abuse they give their own players online. Reece Priestland almost quit the game because of not just the abuse he was receiving, but he was receiving death threats after he had a bad game. That's how toxic the Welsh rugby fans are. English rugby, people go, oh, you must be an England fan because you want Wales to lose. So I want Wales to lose because your fan base are a bunch of cunts. That's why I want Wales to lose. England, I'm not a fan of English rugby. I've spent a lot of time in Italy, and I've got Irish descent, so I'm more of a fan of Irish Italian rugby, really. But the English 2015, it summed up a lot of problems that English rugby have had since 2003. I think the issues with England, and I'm going to be completely honest, and I've highlighted this in so many videos, and all these Welsh fans, they're mostly Welsh fans that I find the problem with. It's a minority of them. It's the same ones. They just change their name and put a new channel up and just give me more abuse. It's just really sad how persistent they are because all they're doing is helping my view numbers. It's great. It's actually benefiting me the amount of crap they give me. But I've been ripping England for years. Even before I had this channel, I've been so critical of the same issues that England repetitively have. It's a culture issue within that camp because you just got to look at the 2011 World Cup and the misbehaviour of that team off the field. They're still living on past glories of 2003. They are still actually living on the 2007 final as well. So they got to back-to-back finals. They win one, they lose one, but they get back-to-back finals. They try and defend their title, which is rare to get back-to-back finals in any tournament, in any sport. 2011 comes along, and that team was embarrassing. It was, I wouldn't say 2007 papered over the cracks. There was bad coaching. Chris Ashton is a terrible. He is a terrible coach. So Clive Woodward stands down. Robinson comes in. Ashton comes in. Then you have Martin Johnson. Then you have Stuart Lancaster. And now you've got Eddie Jones. There is a lot more managerial. It's at least Sir Clive Woodward had 2 World Cups. They gave him 2 World Cups, the 99 and 2003. Every other coach since then has not had the same amount of time. But no, I wouldn't say 2007 papered over the cracks. I would say it was not the whole squad, but I think it's about 50% of the squad that played at the World Cup before. There were some players coming through. the fact that only one player from that squad is still playing, and that is Toby Flood. Tate has just retired because of a repetitive ankle injury. The issues, though, with England are the penalty count, the discipline off the field and on the field, and being sometimes very one-dimensional, really one-dimensional. They feel entitled to win the Six Nations every year, and they're not. You've got to work to win. I bet you they feel they're entitled to win tomorrow against, Sunday against Italy, and I bet you Italy surprise them. I hope Italy actually shock them, because 2 years ago with Ruckgate, as we'll call it, England couldn't cope, and the Italians were winning that game. It's only when the English decided to play the Italians at their own game that they won that game. England were clueless against Italy 2 years ago with Ruckgate, and that was hilarious, watching this entitled team of entitled upper middle class, and they are. Because I went to Wellington College, so I know exactly what the type of person that is predominantly in this England side. They're entitled as a group of people. They believe, they feel entitled to win everything. But the coaching has got something to do with it, because, I wouldn't say they peaked too early. I would say other teams hadn't peaked yet, because we've seen against Wales the same issues that were prevalent last year, and to a certain extent in the Grand Slam year as well. I would say other teams hadn't peaked and were on the upswing as England were just going along. I think England, you've got to look at the squad they got and the amount of players in that squad who are leftovers from 2011 and that disgraceful World Cup performance in New Zealand, where the off-field antics overshadowed the poor on-field as well. The poor discipline on the field and the off-field antics were a disgrace. 2015, a lot of that squad were retained, and there's a leadership vacuum. I think it's a long-standing this entitlement, and there are those that oh, I've got a notification. Sorry, I've got a notification from one of my favourite channels that I'm going to be clicking onto in a bit just to see what he's up to, because I'm involved in this channel thing where at the end of the week I give a vote on the favourite video of the week, because he's a gamer, he's a game streamer, and I'm involved with his channel in his Discord, so I've got to actually watch that and give my opinion. So I'm actually involved on the YouTube community, as I call it. But no, I wouldn't say 2007 papered over the cracks. I would say after 2003, I think England peaked at their best in 2003, 2004. It's been a slow, painful decline for quite some time. But also the issue is, Sir Clive Woodward was given 2 World Cups to get that team right. Every other coach has been given less than a World Cup cycle to get it right. So that's another issue as well. It is coaching, but it's also the discipline of players. It's the culture and it's the style of play that is played in the English game. And on top of that, selection. Selection's another problem. For me, there are not enough Exeter players getting selected. They have been consistently one of the best teams in England for the better part of 6 years. It's only now they're getting recognised for all the good. It's like Newcastle players last year as well. This year they're having a shocking season, but last year they were on form and they weren't selecting them. I was like, at least give Toby Flood that secondary call-up, because he has that experience inside centre fly half. He can add experience to that. He's been there in a losing World Cup final. He's got to a World Cup final. None of the players on the field have, apart from him. Bring him in there. Cipriani, the situation with Cipriani is his off-field antics. I think he is an idiot. He is letting himself down, but he's always been one of those hotheads, even when he was a schoolboy. He's a few years older than me, but a few of my schoolmates played against him at school grade, at youth level. He was always a bit of a gobshite. I'm not going to lie. He had that attitude about him. You would hope he would have matured. He hasn't, and that I think is what's killing Cipriani. But he should be in this England squad. I have no doubt, because against Wales, the kicking game, the tactical game, if you're going to keep kicking it to Liam Williams, you're going to get the ball run back a lot. They weren't kicking to green space. They were kicking straight down the throat of the Welsh fullback. Dan Biggar, they kept kicking to him. It is just a no-brainer. Stop doing it. And it really, I was swearing at the TV, because that Wales performance wasn't great. And I've got all these, you missed the last, what game are you watching? It's like, well, I'm watching single up, one up running into a white defensive wall. England's defence was good until about 55 minutes when Sinclair and Courtney Lawes went off. Sinclair because he couldn't behave himself, and Courtney Lawes because he's done his leg in. And the game changed because Dan Biggar came on. And apparently I'm watching a different game, and I don't know anything about rugby, and I'm stupid, and I should fuck off, and I'm a fucking moron. And this is all from Welsh fans. And I'm just like, what game are you watching? Your team won. Accept some criticism, even though your team won. Your team are playing shit. They can't. They ain't give me abuse. And they've been doing it for 2 years. And it sums up how toxic that fan base is. Because if they cared so much, if they care as much as they do about the national side, about the club game would not be in a mess because fans would turn up and watch. They are a toxic, toxic, toxic rugby fan base. And it's a minority. It is a very small minority, but it's enough for me to go, I want that team to lose just to go to their fans. Your team is shit. They're overrated. And it frustrates me because there are some great Welsh players that I really admire. But the fan base, God, it's toxic. It's like football fans. The football fans in this country are a toxic breed. I would say there's a reason why homophobia and racism are rife at football terraces and football grounds in this country. It's because the fan bases are so toxic. They've been allowed to get away with so much for so long because the majority have not stood up and said fuck off. That's the problem with sport, is the majority have not stood up and said fuck off. And they've allowed the minority to allow their toxic festering cancer to continue. And now they're so openly racist and homophobic. It's an embarrassment. The Kick It Out campaign, which itself has been investigated for corruption. So, it's madness. I'm going on a rant now. I shouldn't rant so much because I was just trying to have a positive live stream. But some of the issues raised, apparently I'm clueless. It's like, no, I've played the game. I've played at club level. I've played rugby at my local rugby club. I know exactly why there is a funding issue at grassroots level. When you're asking players to pay to play, that is a problem. Professionalism is not working for all levels of the game. It's just, but there are some teams, club and national teams, that have toxic fan bases, and when you call them out on it, they abuse you more. And the ones that have given me the most abuse are the ones that don't actually have any content. You look at their YouTube and they just follow a couple of channels. You look at their YouTube and their Twitters and they follow the EDL. And I'm just like, okay, so studies have proven racists have a lower IQ than normal people by about 10 to 15 IQ points. It's hilarious. Back to England though with Eddie Jones. I wouldn't say England peaked last year. I would say other teams hadn't peaked and hadn't hit form, and then some other teams were still tinkering. Back to that point. England still have some severe issues with team discipline on the field. And some of the players that have been selected to play against Italy, I'm shaking my head going, so our centre partnership, we're not going to be passing the ball a lot. I can see a lack of passing at the weekend with Ben Teo and Tuolangi as the centres. They're not going to pass the ball out wide. So what's the point of having Kokosanya on the wing if you're not going to pass the ball to him? So the ball will be passed from Ben Youngs to Farrell to a centre who will then run it into a solid blue wall. That's basically what's going to happen for 80 minutes. I think that is a really chronic selection, and there's a reason why Eddie Jones hasn't won the World Cup as a coach. He's won it as an assistant coach, but never as the coach. That final, it's a known thing that Eddie Jones likes big ball carriers. It's one-dimensional rugby. You need to have a big ball carrier who can also pass the ball. Those two centres cannot pass the ball. They will just run it into a blue rule. They will run it into a tackle. They will run one up without a support runner, and they'll get isolated. And there'll be a penalty for holding onto the ball. It's going to happen. I find it really disheartening when the press are just going, this Italian team have no chance. Well, with that England selection, they have a chance because Owen Farrell will be one-dimensional with his kicking game, and the running game will be one-dimensional because there'll be no passing out wide. So for all Johnny May will be doing on the wing, he'll be doing nothing for half the game. I bet you Johnny May barely gets to touch the ball because the centres are just going to run it into contact every 5 minutes. It's going to be a repeat of the game against Wales. England might win by a few points, but it's going to be exactly repeat 2 weeks ago, repeat the frustration, underwhelm, underperform. Eddie Jones, get your head searched. I think Eddie Jones is overrated as a coach. For all the good he did with Japan, and he did a lot of good with Japan, both structurally and coaching-wise, he's really underwhelmed me with England because the game is too power based for him. He doesn't have enough skill players, and there are a lot of English players playing in the Premiership who are exceptionally skilled. You can pass and kick and run and do all the moves. Cipriani, I'm just going to keep mentioning Cipriani, who are multi-dimensional in how they play the game. He goes for power and meat, and some of the players he selects are not the most intelligent players either. What can I think Conor O'Shea needs to be made director of rugby and another coach brought in under him, because the structural side, the club game is going great. Treviso are ripping up the Pro 14 this year. And they're much closer in games than people realise. People keep writing them off. But I will say this, if Italy do well this weekend and beat France, I will guarantee you the question about relegation from the Six Nations will disappear, especially because there is actually a chance that Italy could win against England, which will be hilarious, but I don't think it's impossible. And I think they can beat that French team. If they get those 2 wins, they won't necessarily finish bottom of the Six Nations. Even if they get a losing bonus point and a try bonus point against England and beat the French with a bonus point, they may not finish bottom of the Six Nations. Then you'll see those calls for the relegation of Italy from the Six Nations to disappear, because for all these people going, we must have relegation and promotion from the Six Nations so Georgia or Romania or Russia can come up and get battered and then relegated straight away, because that's what's going to happen. Because their domestic leagues are just not strong enough and the professional game in those countries is not strong enough. People oversee the oversight there. When Scotland were getting battered every year in the Six Nations in the first 10 years of the tournament, and that's when Italy were more successful and I think were a better side. I'm not going to lie, they were. The calls for promotion relegation weren't there. They've been at their strongest in the last 4 years where Italy have been struggling. And Conor O'Shea inherited a mess from Jacques Brunel, which I think the next French coach will inherit from Jacques Brunel because he's a shocking coach. And the building blocks are in place. To undermine that is more damaging. But I'm looking at the battles that the Georgians and the Romanians, especially in Europe, and the South Sea Island nations in Tonga and Fiji, Samoa have shot themselves in the foot because they can't govern the game in their country, but Tonga and Fiji, the barriers being put in place for them are the same barriers that Argentina had in entering the Rugby Championship and Italy entering the Six Nations. They're exactly the same barriers. It's the elite trying to stay as elite as possible without allowing new members to their club. Now that Italy have made it as a member of the club, they also want to stay elite. The ironic thing is, Conor O'Shea is actually in favour of promotion relegation because he'll think it will make his team play harder. That is ironic. But you'll notice when Italy get a couple of wins in the Six Nations, the calls for relegation from the Six Nations disappear. So when Scotland or France are the worst team in the Six Nations, those calls to relegate and promote disappear entirely because they want to keep the elite. And Scotland are one of those teams that are against promotion relegation because they know that in the last 20 years, they have not been good enough to avoid a possible relegation playoff. They have been consistently one of the bottom 2 teams regularly in the Six Nations. So you'll see those calls for promotion relegation disappear when France and Scotland are struggling in the Six Nations. And if Italy can get points against England, be it bonus points, losing, try bonus, or even a cheeky win, which I do believe Italy are capable of doing. I honestly do believe that. It was the missed kicks against Ireland that did them. If they got those kicks, they win that game. And people are like, you're talking shit. No, look at the missed kicks. Work out, even with Sexton's missed kicks, work out all the missed kicks, look at what the score would have been. And they're like, oh yeah. The numbers do not lie. I keep saying this. You've got to look at the stats. People frustrate me. Especially Welsh rugby fans. It's a minority of them. I've got some great Welsh rugby fans who are subscribers to the channel, but there's a toxic minority. And more of the majority need to call them out. Because it starts off with not accepting a point of view to then threatening people. And some of the toxic people on this channel who watch and regularly slag me off are pushing to the I've had death threats, so it's not a joke. I've had it. As I was saying, you will see the promotion relegation aspects disappear. But Argentina and Italy, which is what's really surprising me about this whole rugby league, international league thing, is they face the same challenges Georgia, Romania, Russia, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa are now. the same change. The reason why the US and Japan are in there is because the corporate money, which I think is where World Rugby is turning into FIFA. They're chasing the money, and it's undervaluing the game. Arsenal Man United score prediction. I think Man United have come out of the European games this week better. They've had an extra day to rest. I'm going for a Man United win, but the Football Podcast Show, I'm going to say this, and I've discussed this with every other subscriber who's ever come on a live stream. I do not predict scores. Anyone who predicts scores and gets more than a 70% strike rate on a score prediction is either A, a genius, or B, involved in match fixing. I'm going over for a Man United win, but I'm not going to predict the score. I think what's going to come down to is they played better against PSG. They're going to take a lot of positives out of that. Arsenal lost to Rennes and were embarrassed. So one team beats the French side, the best French side in the league. PSG have bought the French league for eternity because they can breach whatever financial laws they want because it's PSG and it's Neymar and it's Thiago Silva and it's dirty Arab money. Rennes, mid-table side, embarrass Arsenal. I think Man United, it's going to be a Man United win. I would say by 2 goals, but I'm not going to give a score because that would be knowing too much. I can't predict. I've proven I can't predict results. Just look at my preview for the last round of the Six Nations and how fucking wrong I was. And I'm going to say how wrong I was because it was so embarrassing. The Scotland game, really, I ripped my hair out in the Scotland game because I predicted a Scotland win by 30 points and it didn't happen. And I only got one prediction right, and that was the Ireland-Italy game being within 10. All other predictions I got wrong. Badly. And yeah. But no, I think Man United will be favourites for that. They get an extra day rest, and they had a very positive result, and that's the best way to describe it. Arsenal had a very negative result and a player sent off, and were shown up to have a lot of deficiencies. Man United showed that in adversity and under pressure, they can pull a result out the hat, and they proved that against Southampton last weekend as well. Coming from behind and really having to fight for a win against a committed Southampton side that have improved massively under Husenhuttl. They did put up a good response. So I think it's in Man United's court. It's Man United's game to lose. Arsenal, I think there's a lot of work needed at Arsenal going forward, and I think Arsenal could continue to decline for years to come. I think we've discussed football earlier on the live stream, and I really went into finances and my love for the game disappearing and issues with a variety of things to do with the sport. I mean, I've got over on my bedside table over there. I've still got all my World Cup notes from the World Cup last year, and this is interesting. And this is something that I think any football expert or fan should look into. Is the amount of teams that won in the World Cup last year with less than 45% possession. It's high. Do I watch the non-league? I live very close to Bracknell Town Football Club. I live a 5-minute walk away from my local non-league football club. A few of my mates play for the football club as well. But I don't really... It always seems to clash with when I'm doing other activities. And so I don't really get round to watching. Because I go more to ice hockey matches, I go more to my local ice rink to watch the Bracknell Bees play. It clashes. I don't have the time to do both, and I know what I would rather watch, and that is my local ice hockey team. And I know where I'd rather be. No offense to Bracknell Town. I mean, I'm a stone's throw away from the football club, which is great. It's great that it is a community club as well. It really is, but it clashes with some of my other commitments that I have, and it's and for me, I have lost my love for football over recent years. I really have. But talking about non-league, my mate Dino, his pub in Maidenhead is right next to Maidenhead United's ground. So again, I have seen I'm nearby to football, but at the same time, do I really want to go to a game right now with the state of the game as it is and how I feel about the game? I think it would go against all the principles that I've had for the last decade of saying I'm not going to a game until governance is changed. It's a principle thing. I'm not going to give the FA any more money. I'm not going to give any more of my money to the sport that needs reform. I'm voting with my wallet and I'm staying away. I haven't bought a new football jersey for over a decade. I haven't been to a match for over a decade, and I'm going to stick by that because I honestly believe that the game in this country and in the world needs massive reform. And I think more people should vote with their wallets, stop buying the TV packages, stop going to games, and say, look, we need to reform this sport to make it fairer for the fans and make it a more balanced, even playing field for the clubs. Because what we're seeing is there is an elite section of clubs that basically you can pick 1 out of 6 who are going to win a trophy every season. And I'm hoping Wolves and Watford and Crystal Palace do really well in the FA Cup and actually give 2 fingers to the established order, much like Leicester did. I like seeing new names on trophies. It's beneficial for a league. It makes a league more healthy when you have more competition. This is why the Scottish League has struggled massively. It's because it's not competitive enough. It's been great this season, but you need new names on trophies for a league to keep having interest and to gain new fans and new investment. You need to make a league more interesting and more competitive for all teams rather than just a select few, because eventually that means fans do switch off. And when you're losing your hardcore fans and those periphery fans around the community and they're switching off, it doesn't matter how much you sell a game abroad and how you sell leaguers abroad. If your domestic audience is losing interest, that's when you have problems. That's why Italian football has declined in the last 10, 15 years. The domestic audience in Italy is switching off. There's plenty of empty seats at games. The league is less competitive. And you have to admit, the match fixing scandals have something to do with that, but when the league is won by Juventus every year, it gets a bit boring. And fans will switch off if the same team wins year on year on year on year and there's no new name on a trophy. It will turn fans off. They'll get bored. They'll go, oh, right, this team's going to win. What's the point of our team even playing? That's why I was so concerned with Man City last year winning by such a big margin, is if they win again this year and then the year after and then the year after, fans will switch off. The majority of fans that you need, those good, healthy fans, will go, this is boring. I don't want to watch this anymore. I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. Which is why you need a competitive, every team has a chance of winning this league kind of mentality. And I think that's where European football's going wrong, because they're trying to make it so the elite stay elite. And then that miracle story of a Wolfsburg winning in Germany or a Leicester City winning the Premier League doesn't happen. And that's actually more negative than positive for a sport. You need some of those Cinderella stories to happen, not just regularly, but regularly enough to go, there is enough here for the average fan to keep interested, going, this is an interesting league to watch, because there's now 7 teams or 8 teams or 10 teams that have ever won the league rather than a few. And it makes it more exciting and more interesting to be involved with, and more interesting to want to watch and to be a part of. Right, well, there we go. I think I've ranted a bit more than I would like to in this video, but I felt I need to, because the last couple of weeks it's pent up frustration with a lot of people who have had a more negative outlook on the channel than I think they need to. I think they need to accept there's a different point of view, and I've noticed most of that, all of those who've been leaving shitty comments or being highly critical, and I'm open to criticism, but I've noticed none of them have got their own content online, and I went on some of their Twitter feeds, and some of the members of the EDL, so that's nice. It just shows, how vile the internet is. But oh well, I'm going to leave that there. It's been an interesting little live stream, and we've obviously got a lot of sport this weekend that I'm covering, so there's going to be a lot of rugby videos coming up, and I do think we're going to have 3 really interesting Six Nations games. I think Italy have more of a chance than people realise. I think Scotland-Wales is now much more up in the air as a contest because of Ali Price starting over Greg Laidlaw. I think the weather's going to have an impact. There's a chance of snow. And Ireland, France, what French team is going to turn up? That is key. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your thoughts below, and I will have more videos for you soon.